Grading! The previous eyes animation tutorial performed pretty well, so why not build on that and explore other ways to animate eyelids and pupils. I'll show a different system for the pupil and a kind of mixed but still new system for the eyelids, which was explained to me by a colleague from the same field. Just to clarify up front, I already have the prepared layers and their mesh. Let's begin with the eyelids. First, you need to draw a straight line using the Path tool. Create the line starting from the main head bone and extending along the entire eyelid. Once that's done, create a bone that corresponds to the size of your eyelid and then divide it using the Slit tool. Next, select the bones and apply a path constraint to attach them to the path and allowing them to move along it. Set these values and adjust the position of the bones accordingly. Now repeat the same process for the other eyelids. The bones that are already in place should be bound to the eyelids. I mentioned earlier that this method would be a hybrid, as referenced in the previous tutorial. Create an arrow controller bone for each eyelid. Unlike before, where your arrow bone was used to deform the eyelid points directly, this time you'll need to assign weights to the points on the path instead. Step by step. First, bind the head bone to all the paths and apply it. Then bind both the upper and lower arrow bones to each path. Now create a blink mover and use the Set Parent option to parent the upper arrow bones to it. Make sure to add the arrow control bones to each of the eyelid layers as well. Time to animate. Let's switch to the animation window and create an animation for the upper eyelids closing. Something like that. Select the upper path and assign the weight of the linked arrow bone to the points on this path. Simulate the eyelid closing by bending the path, which deforms the attached layer. At this point, you might notice some uneven deformation in certain polygons on the layer. To correct this, select the layer and fine-tune the weights of the arrow bones by adding or subtracting influence on the affected points. Let's finish the mechanism. Select the lower arrow bone, apply a transform constraint, and choose the upper arrow bone as the one influencing the lower one. Use the match setting and enter a value of approximately -30 or whatever feels right in that range. Also, if things aren't working as expected, make sure to check the order of this constraint in the list. Now, repeat the same steps as with the first eyelid by assigning weights to the points on the path. To fix this issue, assign the arrow bone's weight directly to the layer points. Now let's add the bones to the head. First the main one, then the 4 arrow bones. Finally, add weights to the edge points to make the eyelid fully functional. But don't mix up the arrow bones, it's better to label them. Incredible. That's it for the eye closing setup. Now let's repeat this tedious process for the other eye. And pupil animation is the only part left. Create 3 bones coming from the head bone, plus, minus, and eyes mover. Then also create bones for the eye highlights, pupils, and scale controls. The scale bones, however, should be parented to the pupil bones. Bind the pupils first to their own bone, then to the plus, minus, and scale bones originating from the pupil bone. Don't forget to bind the eye highlights to their corresponding bones as well. Let's bind the pupil bones to the eyes mover using a transform constraint. I'll apply the mesh parameter and set the value to around 50. It turned out like this, with a delayed movement. Now, let's do the same with the plus and minus bones. Set the plus bones value to 150, and the minus bones value to -50. So, these are the movements we've got. Let's create the familiar animation using the eyes mover, moving it from side to side. Select the pupil and add some weight from the plus bone to the inner points like this. Then add weight from the minus bone to the outer points of the pupils. Now, add a transform constraint to the highlights and set its value to approximately 40. Don't forget we have scale bones. Add weight from the corresponding scale bones to the pupil in a similar way. Now apply a transform constraint from the corresponding scale bones to scale controller. And set the scale value to around 50. Let's make it so that the scale controller also affects the highlights during scaling. The only thing left is to make sure the eyelids are affected when the pupils move. I'll set the value to around 20 for the upper eyelids and a little bit less for the lower one. Well, it's time to say goodbye. I put a lot of effort into this video and tried to cover as much as possible. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't ignore the work that went into it and don't let that effort go unnoticed. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.